It's EWA podcast number 29, and I have the pleasure of taking another podcast virginity, so sit back, relax, and listen to Cameron and I go on about his career.
I make my final stand. Hey, that's why they call me bad company, and I can't deny. Bad company till the day I die. Oh, till the day I die.
And welcome, everyone, to the EWA podcast. It's podcast 29, and it sounds like the person on the other end has dropped his laptop. But I'm not starting this over, by God. This the fourth take, be damned. We're not starting this over. Want to welcome everybody back. We are back, and guess what? We're better than ever. I have a first-timer on this week. The very man who went to battle against Cody Rhodes last week on Slam with his newer tag team, Bad Company. Cameron, welcome to the EWA podcast.
Thank you. Go easy on me. It's my first time. I don't like it rough that I know of yet. I don't know. Well,
you might like rough podcasts.
Does against my will count? Because Steve has definitely come at me in ways I wasn't sure about.
Oh, Steve. If there's one thing Steve's known about, it's how aggressive he comes towards people. Let me finish my sentence, please, before you go judging me. Steve, I asked Steve if he wanted to come on to the podcast with you, and he was like, I do want to steer his... That doesn't sound like him at all, does it? I don't want to steer his thunder in... see, that's Australian. Whatever. Steve's a prick. He didn't want to come on with you. He didn't want to steal your thunder. I said, what thunder?
Oh, well.
We're all a big happy family here in the EWA, right?
Except for Steve. Nobody likes Steve.
Well, nobody likes Steve.
He's like cousin that everybody avoids at the family reunions and just leaves him to masturbate with his tiny hand.
Is Steve the member of the EWA family that we're, like, all ashamed of?
I think so. He's the black sheep. He's definitely the black sheep.
You think he's the black sheep of the family?
I don't know if it's the little hand or the fact that he's just a massive cunt, but he's the black sheep.
It's got to be one of those two. What do you think Newt is in terms of a family reunion?
Like the patriarch. I almost said matriarch, which he probably would have just jobbed me out for the rest of Bad Company's tenure.
Well, if there's one thing I've learned after 28 podcasts, it's things you say on here affect your character and their standing in the EWA. I mean, John comes on, and Steve Corino is no longer here. Is this not a concern to anyone?
Oh, well.
The EWA podcast is where you go to kill off your characters forever. And let's talk about your characters. Cameron,
I put my characters on my own. It's fine.
Oh, do you? I was going to say, let's talk about your history in the EWA. When did you join the EWA? How did you come to find it? What's really your early history with the EWA?
Well, it was in 2007 when the Ring of Honor Fed was still going on. Mm-hmm. John had posted a link to that. Back then he was doing his South Park wrestling pictures that he would make, and he had a site for it in forums, and I was on there. And he had posted a link, and so I tried it out, and I was Jeff Hardy in Ring of Honor. Mm-hmm. I think originally I had Michael Hayes or somebody as my manager, mm-hmm. and so I joined there, and then found out about EWA through that. And my first character here was Vampiro, and it was pretty terrible. We're talking like 20-line RPs at the most.
Was this your first foray with e-fedding?
Yeah.
So like you were green as green could be then.
Oh yeah. And I was that was 7 years ago. So I was 13.
Oh wow.
So it wasn't exactly a very, very critical thinking creative writer. 13. It was
you're dumb and you're stupid and you look ugly and I'm gonna beat your ass. If Vampiro hits you with a guitar,
he's gonna lose.
Vader would make an awful president, and
like they'd be like these little shitty cutaway segments that you'd see like on real wrestling shows were my role plays.
Yeah.
Little like offhand conversations between Vampiro and whoever, and which was probably Crowbar, because I think I brought him in, and we were at the time there was somebody playing the Insane Clown Posse. And somebody playing that CZW guy, Nick Mondo, and we were gonna form a group, and then the ICP guys disappeared, and I ended up switching characters.
Now let me ask you this. 2007, you start Vampiro. You're 13 years old. Now, to my knowledge, Vampiro hasn't been in a wrestling ring, especially on a grand stage, since probably, like, 2000, maybe. 2002. Right? I would say 2000. So what was it that drew you to Vampiro? Like, why are you going down that road as a 13-year-old?
About the time that I joined EWA, Wrestling Society X had been on TV. Yeah, that... At 13 years old, that thing was cool. Not so much now.
What?
Because me and the kid next door was into wrestling too, and we'd watch it.
What a nerd, right?
And, so...
And that guy grew up to be Steven Waters.
I don't live where he lives.
Oh, okay. Never mind then. Never mind.
So went back, and I had seen, like, bits and pieces, because we would watch WCW, not as much because it sucked then, so my dad wouldn't watch it.
Oh, you're talking about, like, when you're really young.
Yeah, like 2000, 2001. So I was, like, 7, 8, something like that.
Literally the worst possible time to watch WCW.
Yeah, right at the end, you know, where it was Vampiro and ICP and...
Judy Bagwell on a pole.
Yeah, and Muda.
Judy Bagwell on a forklift.
But it wasn't, like, anything great with Muda. And, like, I think they, like, feuded with Ernest the Cat Miller, and it was bad. Mm-hmm. And I think Vampiro fought, like, Crowbar and Mike Awesome and a few others then, and that's how I knew about Mike Awesome. Which was the worst way to know about Mike Awesome, because he's actually a pretty good wrestler, or was. He's dead. But...
What? Okay. That was a reaction to was a good wrestler. I know he's dead.
Yeah. Had to correct myself.
Wow. So you weren't a WWE kid growing up?
No, we were, but we would watch WCW every now and then. Like, we would flip channels during commercials, and that's, like, the most I would see of current WCW. Yeah. My dad had a lot of tapes of WCW from, like, 93, 94, and a few from 95, because they used to get all the WCW pay-per-views, and him and his brothers and my grandfather would watch them and record them on the VHS.
But I did something very similar. My parents weren't the richest people in the world, but I think I might have said this before, like in a feedback or something, but we knew a guy at the cable company, and he got us the chip that got us the pay-per-view channels for free. Like, my parents got it from movies, but seriously, like, for once a month, like, I got to watch the pay-per-views, and I'd record them on tape, and I would just watch them over and over. I bet I've seen WrestleMania 6 probably 150 times in my life.
Well, that's like a lot of the tapes that my dad had ended up lost in between, like, when my parents split, all the moving around that he had done.
Yeah.
Some of them got lost, but I had Halloween Havoc 1994. That was in my room. So I've watched that just dozens of times. And,
what was the main event of that?
Hogan and Flair in the cage with Mr. T as the enforcer.
So, if Corey ever came to you and let you pick out the next EWA watches a pay-per-view, is that what you're picking?
Probably not, because
No?
I don't know. It's an alright pay-per-view. It's actually not a bad one for WCW.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, other than Dave Sullivan and Kevin Sullivan, that whole entire idea was bad.
Yeah.
But I mean, they've got, like, Vader against Big Boss Man, but that's when he was Guardian Angel.
Yeah, Vader.
The Nasty Boys against Terry Funk and Jimmy Golden, but he was Bunkhouse then.
Oh, Bunkhouse Buck.
With Robert Parker and Ming as the Muscle.
Do you have the WWE Network?
I do.
Because I've noticed, I know people hate it whenever we talk about fucking real wrestling on here, but fuck you. You're going to listen because eventually we're going to talk about EWA, so fucking listen. I've noticed, like, whenever I've gone back now and watched the early Hogan days in WCW, it really wasn't that good.
No, a lot of it wasn't. It was just them trying to do a lot of things based on the fact that Hogan was big and had been in WWF, and you know, bringing in, like, they brought in Brutus Beefcake. I don't remember if it was under a different name, but, you know, they brought him in, and there was it was him in WWF again and not as good.
Yeah, and it makes you really think, too, because if you watch WCW's product then, like, it was awful, and WWF was still getting, like, shellacked, even with WCW putting out an inferior product. But that's because WWF at that time they were pushing guys like fucking King Mabel.
Right.
Like, he main evented that. I mean, Diesel was not that good.
Yeah, Kevin Nash has never been a good wrestler.
No. I mean, that was the come up time of Bret Hart, and that's cool, but he was feuding with, like, Bob Backlund. Like, nothing made sense.
Right. And WCW had the Dungeon of Doom, which was just awful all the time. Mm-hmm. And what else? I mean, stuff like... I mean, they had Cactus Jack then, I think, but had him feuding with, like, Abdullah the Butcher and others.
Oh, God. Have you ever seen... Okay, I know you go to a lot of live shows. Have you ever seen Abdullah live?
No.
I have. I've been to, like, 4 shows in my life, and I've seen Abdullah once.
Wow, that's
terrifying.
Bad.
You just recently saw Tatanka.
Yes. Yeah.
Truth be
told,
Tatanka...
He was actually a last-minute replacement for Jim the Anvil Neidhart, who backed
really?
out. Yeah, he canceled... I think it was 2 days before the show, so they got Tatanka to come in, and Ricky Morton actually fucking no-showed.
You know why?
Ricky Morton? Yeah, he was in Florida.
I was going to say, because Ricky Morton's a piece of shit.
Oh, well, that too. But, yeah, he was supposed to wrestle Just Incredible, because at another show from the same company, a feud started between Shane Douglas and Ricky Morton for God knows what reason.
That's to see who could be the head security at Target.
But Shane Douglas couldn't be here, so he sent Just Incredible in his place was what they were saying, and he's got a gut on him right now, and he even talked about it at the show, talking about how he's gotten fat. But so we got Just Incredible versus Cody Hall instead, because originally it was Jimmy Anvil Neidhart and Cody Hall taking on these guys called the Mid-Atlantic Outlaws. They're local. For the tag titles. And then we were going to have Ricky Morton against Just Incredible. And then Ricky Morton no-showed because he double booked and was in Florida with Robert Gibson and his lazy fucking eye. And they weren't actually wrestling. It was an appearance. So I'm assuming they may have gotten paid as much and had to do less. Mm-hmm. And he may honestly make more money on autographs and such if he's signing with Robert Gibson because of the Rock and Roll Express name. Even if they are two of the oldest, ugliest looking bastards at this point.
They're both still sporting mullets.
Well,
so where did Tatanka fit in? Who did he fight?
He teamed up with a local guy named oh God, I forget his name now. Michael something, and they wrestled those Mid-Atlantic Outlaw guys for the tag titles instead, and they won. But then the decision got reversed because it was never signed on paper for a title match.
Okay,
like
that makes sense.
Classic little heel swerve where he
kayfabe
the ref over, and
I gotta come clean. I was a Tatanka mark. Like, seriously, 8-year-old Craig was a fucking Tatanka mark. Like, I loved him.
My dad had to tell me who Tatanka was when he resurfaced in WWE in like 2006 or whatever it was.
How did your dad explain? He's like, that's an Indian.
He said that he was a Native American wrestler who had been around back in the 90s and was undefeated.
Yeah, he had like he had an undefeated streak that went on forever.
Yeah, he did.
And I think he lost it to Yokozuna. I think he lost to like Yokozuna or Ludwig Borga or some.
Oh God, Ludwig Borga, Jesus.
You remember Ludwig Borga?
Yeah, I do, and I think that was his first televised defeat now, actually.
And he's like, Ludwig Borga, he's like a political guy in Poland now, isn't he?
Holy shit, I have no idea.
Yeah, or in Finland, like where he's from. I think he's like a governor or like a mayor or maybe like on their House of Senate in Finland. Yeah, Ludwig Borga. He's living. It's either that or he's dead.
Well, that's a big difference there, Craig.
No, not really. Politician or dead.
A politician in Poland, yeah.
You're one or the other. So, all right, let's get back. Okay, so you are most well known, probably, for that, not these new people who know you from Bad Company, as the Brian Kendrick. Now, when did you start the Brian Kendrick character, and what would you consider to be the heyday with that character?
think I started him. I'm trying to think. I played Rhino at some point, and then I think I brought Jeff Hardy to EWA after Ring of Honor closed, as a few people did. They brought their characters over if they were available. I think I started Kendrick in late 2008 or early 2009. And the role plays were pretty shitty then, too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't remember what the first match with Kendrick was anymore. I don't have his profile on.
I noticed
on here anymore, and it's on my laptop, which is a piece of shit, and it's not even anywhere near me right now. But I feel like the first match was with somebody who was playing CM Punk, and I don't think it was TZ. I think it was somebody else who didn't last.
Probably John.
Granted, it may have been TZ when TZ just started. But then the first feud Brian Kendrick was in was Brian Kendrick and Tugboat.
Okay, yeah. That's good that Fred Ott's getting some love in the EWA.
And it was,
who was playing Tugboat?
I don't remember. I don't know if it was somebody who's still here, was here for a while or anything, or if it was just a guy who came and was like, hey, I'm going to be Tugboat, and then he disappeared. Because the match on the line was, early on, Kendrick had Velvet Sky as his valet and girlfriend. And so they had, if Tugboat won, he'd get a date with Velvet Sky. And he won.
Genius writing.
But
Genius writing.
Date never happened because the guy who played Tugboat went AWOL. But yeah, I mean, there was, I was still only like 15 or so when I started Kendrick. And so, like, some things like that, I was like, okay, that'll work. Tugboat's fat and disgusting. He wins a date with Velvet Sky, the whore. So, that'll work.
Question. If someone joined as Tugboat, would you revisit that storyline today?
I doubt it.
Listen, I need some closure on the Tugboat Velvet Sky storyline, damn it. Why can you not give this to me? Isn't Fred Ott dead, too?
I don't think so.
Fred Ott's either dead or he's run for office in Massachusetts, I believe.
In Massachusetts?
No, I'm pretty sure Fred Ott died.
No, his partner died. John Tenta died.
Okay, that's...
Fred Ottman's old and doesn't look anything like he used to. Because I think I saw pictures of him, and he's got, like, short white hair and a white goatee, and he actually doesn't look as fat. Like, he's lost weight.
Wow, that's...
Because there was some convention there's pictures of that he was at, and he looked good for his age and for how fat he used to be.
I gotta say, of all the surprising stories I've heard, that's probably one of the biggest. I would say that's probably the master of all shocking stories. That's probably the Shockmaster story.
Shockmaster of Fred Ottman stories.
Too soon? In case he is dead, too soon?
I'm pretty sure it's just John Tenta that's dead.
Of all the wrestlers ever, John Tenta's the only one.
Well, no.
Sean O'Hare.
Chris Benoit.
Who?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's right, he doesn't exist, sorry. Chris Benoit's wife. Can we still say she's dead? Woman?
Yes.
Is she erased from history and everything, too?
As far as I know, no. Have you ever tried to watch one of those pay-per-views that he's in?
Yes, it gives you, like, a warning at the beginning.
Yeah. It's like, he's like, the views and opinions in this are not the express written ones.
It's funny, though, because the first one, it was a WCW one, I don't remember what now, but it was him, and she was his valet because it was after she had moved from Kevin Sullivan to him, and he accidentally hits her.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my god, the warning fits. Because he's beating her here, and he goes on to kill her later.
Sometimes art imitates life, Cameron.
That's a terrible person, but yeah, sometimes.
Which is why I'm really hoping that, like, Cody Rhodes just goes off the deep end and becomes Stardust in real life.
Right.
He just can't handle it.
Yeah.
So, you've how many Super Brawls has Brian Kendrick been in?
Oh goodness, I want to say 3. He was part of the winning team with Jeff as Tanaka, and I think Evan Bourne and goodness, it was the team Zaibatsu, and at the time I was Douglas Williams, who was in the Zaibatsu, but I was also Brian Kendrick, which was my main character. And so when Jeff wanted me on his team, I suggested having Kendrick at least temporarily turn face and working with the Zaibatsu because he had a more defined personality, whereas Douglas Williams, I was honestly winging it.
Right.
I mean, early on, he was kind of like a douchebag, and he was the anarchist, and he would just talk shit. But then, when we did the Zaibatsu, I was like, okay, now he's a face, which I've never really been good at playing, being like, yeah, we're gonna beat him, guys, let's go. I do better with somebody who can just openly talk shit and not care. I guess I could play like an anti-hero, but
that's how everybody is, though. It is so difficult to write as a face, and you probably more than likely got to read a couple face role plays last week between Brett and I.
Yeah.
And it's just difficult. I find myself rewriting lines all the time because I'm like, no, that's too cocky, or no, that's too brash, or no, like this guy wouldn't say this in this situation.
Right.
That would come across as like him being a dick. So I find myself rewriting a lot of my stuff to try and come across as more, I don't know, I guess likable. I want Cody to be likable, but I could definitely see where you're coming from. It's obviously
and I mean, I know it's been a problem in the Fed at times when we have, when we're shorthanded on actual active role players, is there's too many heals. And that's because everybody plays heals because they're easier to play.
Right.
I mean, John as face Carino is probably one of the better baby faces. Jess Tanaka was honestly kind of a tweener. He was the good guy, but he was a badass. So, he'd just be ready to kick ass basically. And then Vic, when he was The Rock as a good guy, basically had everything about The Rock's persona down. And,
which, to be honest, that's not a very face-like person.
No, it's not. But I mean,
Face Rock was still a douche.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Who else? I'm trying to think of other good faces. I mean, Richard Blood right now is probably one of the better played faces, and then you and Brett have it pretty well. But like you said, you're rewriting a lot of lines and stuff, but most of it comes out pretty good guy.
We're so likable.
The storyline of Cody Rhodes helping out Val because he's down and out and all this stuff, and it's all feel good and
it's just two people helping each other, man.
Right.
Whenever I made the turn last year, though, you probably didn't read any of my stuff then, but when I decided to make the turn at King of the Ring and go from heel to face, I had to do it where Cody realizes everyone thinks he's a douchebag. And he has this existential crisis in the park one day with Vicky Guerrero where she's like Cody had just had a car accident and nobody came to visit him, and he was like, why didn't anybody come to visit me? And she's like, because you wouldn't go visit anyone. Yeah, it's basically because you're a jerk ass. And he's like, wow, that sucks. I need to change who I am. And then he became a face and went on to Super Brawl and got betrayed by John and all this other great stuff. So,
I forgot that Vicky Guerrero was with your Cody Rhodes for a while there, wasn't she?
That was played by the person that had Brad Maddox.
Okay. But weren't you guys were in a stable together, right?
Yeah, the Entourage.
Right, okay. Who else was in that?
That was Cody Rhodes, Brad Maddox, Vicky Guerrero, MVP.
Oh, that's right.
And then we had Titus O'Neil and Darren Young in there for a while.
Wasn't that Steve?
Yeah. So you can imagine how that.
You can just anytime someone says that this character was played and you don't remember it, you can just guess that it was Steve.
The only reason we brought Steve in is so he could make us graphics.
That's a valid point because he's terrible. He is shit.
Oh yeah, as a writer.
As everything, just Steve is.
Just as a person.
Steve.
Wow. Well, now I kind of wish he would have came on this podcast. What if I went all Jerry Springer and just pulled him on right now?
Well, Steve is actually here tonight.
Well, we've got a surprise for you, Cameron. Steve is actually here. So,
the only problem is I wouldn't understand a fucking word he says is turned into the fucking Steve Austin chant.
What?
What?
Let's get back to Brian Kendrick because God knows people don't want to hear about Steve. No. So would you say we haven't seen from Brian Kendrick in a long time? Is Brian Kendrick, as far as Cameron running him in EWA, dead and gone?
I don't know. Well, I'm actually I'm playing him somewhere else because I thought it would be fresh instead of, he's in EWA. I've done a few different things with him, and it kind of, sometimes a change in environment, he got stale here, is what it felt like. And he's active elsewhere. And it was around the same time that I started playing Perry Saturn in Court Caution, which...
Oh, yeah, that was like the Breaking Bad thing, wasn't it?
Yeah. That I don't think Newt was exactly pleased to approve. I think he's probably sitting at home just face palmed when he saw the application for that. And I mean,
I really don't think Newt cares. I really don't.
He's probably seen just so much just with Dylan alone in the BWO.
Yeah.
I don't think he can get much lower.
Dylan was extremely ecstatic to have Perry Saturn in Court Caution.
He was, Perry Saturn I had played before in the BWO B team when he was mentally challenged.
Wait a second. There was a group called the BWO B team?
There was. It was led by Hollywood Nova, and it included Hollywood Nova, Kurgan, I think, ended up in it for a little bit because he joined. We did a lot of weird things.
D'Lo Brown?
Mentally challenged Perry Saturn. No, D'Lo Brown's always been Dylan, with Dylan's group. Kai and Tai, because why not be racist with it?
Okay, yeah.
And
makes sense.
And Bob Holly, who was, he was in the Job Squad and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, let's throw him in there, and he was just kind of like being associated with these people, and Nova would get mad at him all the time and call him a bad Bob Holly and say he was being a terrible Bob Holly and stuff, and Kai and Tai was just basically there to be the brunt of racial humor.
Indeed.
And Perry Saturn was mentally challenged, and Dean Malenko made a few appearances. Actually, I think it was when John was running. Oh God, somebody did a Nintendo 64 thing for a while, and we did these like little half-ass role plays, and then he simulated the matches. I think Newt did that, and I was Perry Saturn and Dylan, I was Perry Saturn and Dean Malenko, I think. I might have been both, or me and Dylan were writing them together or something. But it was basically Perry Saturn was mentally challenged, and Dean Malenko was like his handler. And Dean Malenko would, took him out to the park and was like hitting on women, like, oh yeah, I take care of him. It's a shame that he's like this. And Perry Saturn would want Candy Floose, which was, I think, you'd have to ask Dylan because that started with Dylan. And I never exactly understood what it was, but I went with it because it was retarded, like our Perry Saturn. And so when that stopped, we ended up doing the BWOB team a while later, and they actually had an interfeud between the A team and the B team.
Oh, there was an A team. I just thought it was like BWO B team.
The A team. I
thought the B team was as high as the scale went for the BWO.
No, there was an A team which was Dylan's current group. Al Snow, Colt Cabana, D'Lo Brown, I think every now and then when he decides to show up.
Domini.
Ergen, since he can't say K's, Blue Meanie, and Sheiky Baby.
Wow.
I don't know how he's involved anymore either.
Just to think that the BWO used to be even bigger is terrifying.
For a few months. Couple months. Something like that. But it ran its course, too. I mean, I think I was playing someone else that might have been to do something a little more comedy-oriented, because I think at the time, me and Jeff were doing that really long, drawn-out, intricate Invisible War storyline that we were doing together.
Whew.
And so I was probably playing a handful of Japanese people at the time.
Of course.
Which was like, I know, and I was going to say Craig, but you're Craig. Corey, was pulling for me to bring back Nakamura, but I brought him in. He was part of that. He was sent as basically like a hitman to take out Tanaka, and they had a match on a pay-per-view or Slam or something, and I brought in a couple other New Japan guys that wrestled on Slam, like some of Tanaka's guys, and then we had the big blow-off match between Nagata and Tanaka, which, I mean, we had fun, and it was, we had drawn that storyline out so much over super late night AIM conversations for weeks, and we just we'd get to a point where we'd be like, okay, and then we can have the final match, but then we'd add on to it and be like, no, we need to expand on this, or no, we need to get these two involved more, and stuff like that. And it ended up really drawn out, and then we'd miss some weeks just because Jeff would get busy with political stuff, or I'd get busy with work and school, and we'd miss a week and be like, oh shit, now we're behind, and stuff.
So how that whole Invisible War storyline, are you happy with the way it went, or do you wish it would have gone a little different, or maybe ended it sooner?
I think we might have drug it out a little too far, and people lost interest or lost, because if you miss some, like a detail point, that you got lost in general with it.
Right.
And
it wasn't something where you can miss a week and then pick back up the next week.
Right, and then some of the stuff was, like bringing in Nakamura and stuff like that, I think may have lost some people because they were honestly just brought in for the storyline. There was no intention of keeping either one of them. But it was to get this whole thing for Tanaka and give the Zaibatsu their war with all this backstory that Jeff had done in, how we do all the prologues and stuff from Tanaka's past. I don't know if you were around for a lot.
I was kind of at the very tail end of it.
Okay, so there was, I'm sure you've seen Jeff RPs where he does some prologue stuff, and some of it's like in the past with his character and stuff, and
there's music
and get
in the background.
The background information and backstory. He did a lot of those with Tanaka that referred to like these different factions from around the world of wrestlers and how they went to war and all this stuff. And like there was a faction for Mexico and one for, I think Canada and the United Kingdom were together in a faction with like the Hearts and then like Johnny Saint and some older British guys. And then there was the Patriots in the U.S. and then the Zaibatsu in Japan. But yeah, I mean, we brought in like Antonio Inoki. Well, he'd been around, but he got more prominent for when the Invisible War stuff really kicked in, and brought in Yuji Nagata and Nakamura, and I brought in Ayumi Kurihara, the female Japanese wrestler, to kind of do stuff with Hamada and stuff like that. And it got very involved, and I think a lot of people probably did lose track of who was who and why they were here, especially like the one-ins and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that we had a tag match with Tenzan and Kojima from New Japan. Daniels, and people were probably like, okay, who are these guys and why are they on Slam,
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, they're not your run-of-the-mill guys. Most casual fans don't know them. If someone shows up on Slam and you see their name there in print and it's like Titus O'Neil, you're like, oh, fuck, like, what the fuck is Titus O'Neil doing here?
Right.
But if you see, like, Ninjahara, Yuji Gata, or whoever, you're like, but you see, like 3 or 4 names like that in a row, you're like, I don't know who's who and what's
because all of a sudden on
here.
Slam, you're seeing Yuji Nagata, Hiroshi Tenzan, Satoshi Kojima. It's just like, okay, who made these people up?
yeah, you're just like, I don't know who's with who, I don't know who hates who. There's a lot of talk about respect going on around here, and I'm just confused.
And I think we had even name dropped like Hiroshi Tanahashi and stuff as being Tanaka's allies over in Japan who were fighting the war front over there, which probably just made it a little more confusing. But I mean, as far as how everything played out, I was satisfied because me and Jeff hit everything we wanted to hit with it. I mean, so the storyline got finished and had its conclusion with Tanaka defeating Yuji Nagata and sending his ass back to Japan and being triumphant and warding them off from EWA. But I think a lot of people did get lost along the way, and I think some people had even started to mention that towards the end in the feedback for Slam and stuff. Like, why is, it got a little...
Oh, I got there late. Like, late in the story, and, like, shit would just be going on. I was just like, I was like, wow, it's cool that there's such an intricate and deep storyline going on, because Jeff would post those, like, the story up until now type thing.
Right, yes, he was doing that, yeah, which was supposed to help out those who had lost track.
Right, but then it just made it more confusing, because... Like, you had to use Control-Find for the names just to figure out who was going on with what,
Yeah, this is true. But yeah, because, me and him, we both knew people were losing track because, there was plot points that would be brought up in role plays and then plot points that would be touched on Slam. And it, unless you're reading every little thing, which, unless you're, like, Newt when you're putting the shows together, I honestly don't think everybody reads every single thing. I know sometimes I'll skim RPs and but then I'll go back and read them, like, if I'm interested, which it's not to say that anyone's, like, shitty and I'm like, fuck him, I don't want to read his work. It's more, being pressed for time and having to do my own role plays and having to see what's going down on the show so that I know who's involved with what if I'm trying to get a storyline going. So...
Listen, it's one of those things where people are so pressed for time and have shit going on to where, like, they can't listen to a podcast. When are they going to have time to sit down and read everyone's work?
Every single role play every week.
Yeah, and, it's admirable, and sometimes it's hard to believe that week in and week out Newt does that.
Right. Yeah.
And
to judge him.
It's one of those things where, like, if Newt came out and said, you know what? Sometimes I don't read the role plays, and sometimes I just make decisions based off momentum and other things. Like
sometimes I sit guys we would no mercy.
One, we would be pissed off, of course.
Right.
But two, it's like we kind of understand, Like we'd be like, well, fuck, I wouldn't read everything every week either.
Right.
So I do think Newt reads it. Otherwise, I don't know. What if Newt came out and was like, you know what? I don't read these every week. Like, sometimes I skim them, and I see Craig wrote a lot of words, a few more than Cameron did. That's good enough for me. Like, what if Newt just came out and said that?
He's just like, I copy and paste your role plays into Word and do the word count, and whoever has more words.
Yeah. He's just like, or I just take
unless
old
your
matches.
role play's centered, then you're screwed.
Oh, nah, I think Shelton Benjamin won with a centered role play once.
Really?
Yeah, because he beat my Bo Dallas with it.
Well, that was, that's Bo Dallas.
That is true. I think Newt just wanted to prove a point.
I think Bo Dallas should get jobbed out for eternity just because of his stupid grin, honestly. But
oh, God, listen to you. You're such a stupid mark.
But hey, he made it into WWE 2K14, so,
yeah.
I know who's my ragdoll for this game. It's usually Ric Flair. I honestly just like beating the shit out of Ric Flair in WWE games.
Yeah.
Like, especially old Ric Flair.
Yeah. Who's
beat
mine?
The shit out of him with chairs, make him bleed. He blades all the time in real life anyway, so...
I don't know who I like to just beat the shit out of. I don't have anyone that I just, like super despise in WWE today.
I mean, in WWE games, I tend to beat on Slater, too. And I honestly think it's because he's a ginger.
You don't like gingers?
No, I just think I'm just drawn to it. Like, oh, he's got a stupid face, he's a ginger, and I beat him up.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, that's hard.
We're going down a deep, dark road in this podcast. How many characters would you say that you've started and stopped and controlled over the last, let's just go 2 years in EWA?
2 years. I don't.
You don't have to name them all off, but just like a rough number.
4. Let's see. I know I brought Kendrick back at some point.
Yeah, Kendrick has been on and off like at least 3 or 4 times since I started in EWA.
Did the last 2 years?
Yeah.
Oh, that includes. That includes like the tail end of the Invisible War when I was actually playing these other guys. So probably close to 10.
Wow, that's a lot. Like I kind of heard you had like a reputation of having multiple characters, and not a lot of them get a a long tenured run other than the Brian Kendrick. So do you
Right.
think that that Bad Company will fall into the same fate as the other characters that you've started and stopped?
I'm hoping not, and I'm trying not to. And the reason I picked the guys I picked was because Silas Young is developing a personality on Ring of Honor, but I haven't been keeping up with Ring of Honor. And then Bull Dempsey's, he's got like a general personality on NXT, but I know like when I was talking to Steve before, he said that sometimes playing wrestlers who aren't on TV is harder. And it just depends. But like these guys, I'm like, okay, they're both in general on TV, they're just pissed off. And I can go with that, but they're also guys that are like, if I mold them in these vastly different ways, people aren't going to read it and be like, you know? Like if I were to take, I feel like if I were to take like The Rock or Triple H or something, and make them like super different, some people would kind of just tilt their heads and be like, yeah, okay, you know? But like Bull Dempsey, you know, unless you watch NXT, you probably don't even know who the hell he is.
Right.
And same with Silas Young, unless you watch Ring of Honor.
Right.
And they're just two, you know, tougher looking dudes. And so I decided, okay, pair them up. And Bad Company was a name I toyed around with before for the tag teams. I don't know why, and it may just be because there's a band called that, and it was an excuse to use the Five Finger Death Punch cover of the song named after the band that the band plays from the album of that name. And it just fit with them. And when, you know, Pat Tanaka and Paul Diamond were Bad Company and AWA, and we're a pretty cool tag team. So
what about the decision to use Heyman?
Hey, well, I got his DVD and was watching the old Dangerously stuff on that, and I've also been watching older WCW stuff on the network, WWE Network, and some.
How much is that?
Stuff is on there. Oh, $9.99. Yeah.
Oh shit, that's a good deal.
So watching that was kind of influential in that decision. Just seeing the old Paulie Dangerously, and then even some of the early ECW where he was still going by that name, but had a little more of an edge to him. I'm just not trying to go over the top where he's like shooting off the F-bomb every other word,
right?
Just for the sake of doing it because it's extreme,
right?
And staying away from that word too, because you know, later in his career, Heyman just completely overused that word all the time.
Right.
Which, I mean, it was part of the name of his company. It's understandable. But even after ECW closed down, and they touched on this in his DVD, was when him and Jim Ross were on commentary, because Jerry Lawler had left, he would say stuff about, you know, stuff that happens in WWF being extreme, and Jim Ross would be like, that company's not alive, and
yeah,
get pissed off about it.
Just the word itself became...
Yeah. It was just him trying to, like, keep ECW alive in memory by using that word constantly. And, but, so I'm, you know, trying to play him like the WCW one, the use of the cell phone. I mean, instead of it being like the old 90s cell phone, he's got the huge Samsung Galaxy Mega.
Yeah.
Have you seen one of those things?
Oh, yeah. I don't understand. People have them, like how they fit in their pockets.
They don't, unless you wear really baggy pants.
Like, you have to literally carry that around in your hand.
Yeah, which is why I chose it, because actually a guy I worked with is a really ghetto black guy with dreads, but he got one, and he's just carrying it around, you know, when he'd come into work and shit, and he'd set it down on the counter and be like, I might have to take this shit back. This is too much.
Yeah.
He's like, I feel like a nerd walking around with my computer or something all day. Shit.
Oh yeah, it's like the size of some laptops.
Yeah, and it's the size of a tablet. And so, you know, thinking that, I was like, okay, I can have Heyman, you know, be Paulie Dangerously with that name instead of the Paul Heyman name, and have him act like a lot more like he did back then, but with a little more of a modern twist, and instead of the big-ass old cell phone, because that wouldn't make sense to carry around in 2014, he'll just have a big old smartphone. I'm sure he won't be clocking anybody in the head with it like the cell phone back in the 90s, just for the fact that
I had the tape of the Clash of Champions where he decked that one kid from Boy Meets World or whatever it was from. You know what I'm talking about? Who was that?
Yeah. He's decked the many people with the.
But it was like a pseudo celebrity, and he was with Missy Hyatt, the kid was, and he just like decked that celebrity in the back of the head, and the phone shattered. It was one of my earliest memories of watching WCW. And
first time he brought the phone out, he talked about it in his DVD. He was in AWA, and Vern Gagne thought it was the stupidest idea ever and didn't get it. And but he's like, he said it's a foreign object, and I'll be at ringside, talking on it like I'm busy and important and stuff. And Vern Gagne thought it was the stupidest idea and told him he couldn't. And then one week at the tapings, he just brought it out. And so he was sitting there talking on it like he was on the phone, and Vern Gagne on commentary, somebody said, "Who's he talking to?" And Vern Gagne just goes, "I think he's talking to himself."
By the way, if you're listening and you haven't watched the Paul Heyman documentary, highly suggest you do that.
You've seen it too?
Oh yeah,
that's
very
really
good.
I mean, he's a smart guy as far as knowing the business. I mean, as far as running ECW towards the end, he wasn't exactly smart. He just kind of conned his way through it and didn't pay people and stuff, which is, it happened. And a lot of the ECW guys forgave him. A lot of them who are the ones who basically you don't hear about anymore are the ones who are bitter about it. Guys like Pitbull, Gary Wolf and stuff, like people you don't think of ever are the ones who are like, "Oh, Paul Heyman didn't pay me for 2 months. He's a piece of shit."
Yeah.
But then like Tommy Dreamer and them don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, and he owed Tommy Dreamer and like Rob Van Dam and stuff a lot of money because they were top stars and they were.
But then you take it wasn't even like that really. Like it was. What he said on the documentary, too, he's like, I don't know if this will actually make the cut. But he's like, I'm pretty sure the WWE was pissed that SmackDown was outdrawing Raw in ratings every week when I was in charge of it.
Yeah, when he was writing, yeah.
Of course, they had amazing talent on there. They had, like, Angle, Edge, Eddie.
The SmackDown 6, right?
Yeah.
Referred to as that? Those were great times for SmackDown.
Yeah, so it was probably easy for him to be super entertaining whenever you have these guys that are putting on fucking fantastic stuff every week. But still, I mean, you couldn't live in a world today where SmackDown would outdraw Raw, so.
Right.
And that just wouldn't happen. So.
Well, and they're not even separate rosters really anymore, and it's.
Yeah. Indeed. So you have your Bad Company tag team now. You won the #1 contendership, had a tag team title match just this last week on Slam, so things seem to be going well for this tag team. Not sure what you have in store for the weeks building up to the pay-per-view or if there's a plan for you. Don't want to give away anything if you do, but I'm hoping to see the Bad Company team continue to grow stronger and stronger as the weeks go on.
Oh yeah, I plan on definitely keeping them around for a while. I mean, like, Bull Dempsey and Silas Young have barely even said anything they didn't say anything until the RP against you and Brett.
Right.
And they, they just said really generic stuff.
Yeah.
And they finish things off. And because Dangerously the mouthpiece. So, I mean, that gives me room to do a lot of things. I mean, of course, they could always be interchangeable while they're still relatively generic.
Mm-hmm.
I can define both their personalities, and they can go a lot of different ways. And, I mean, obviously the plan right now is to keep them together and keep them with Dangerously and see how much mileage I can get out of that and how much I can do with them, and if changes need to be made eventually, then they do. But I want to try to stick with the same two guys in the tag team and not change it around a whole lot.
Right. Well, that's good, and like I said, you've made yourself a major player. The tag team division is definitely starting to grow, which is something Brett and I wanted to do whenever we started our tag team. Our goal was definitely not to win the championship, as I said, especially this early. We wanted to help grow and foster the division, but now we have us, as well as Zig Swag, as well as Bad Company, the Bullet Club, very talented writers. And if Dylan wanted to come back full-time with the BWO, I mean, he's definitely has the ability to write at a high level. So it's nice to know that the tag team division is starting to come back around, albeit slowly, but it's a nice...
And I think we could even get Shelton Benjamin and Christopher Daniels, since Jeff and Chris are working together in that group, could become players in the tag division. And Jeff's Christopher Daniels is a former tag team champion.
Yeah, and we'll see more of them this week and know what they look like working together and writing together. So.
Oh yeah, and I mean they're both good, so I mean I'm sure it'll turn out great, and I'm sure they'll if they're interested in getting involved in the tag team division, can very easily do so.
Right. Indeed so. Well, Cam, this has been a pleasure having you on. I wasn't really prepared for the Zaibatsu part. Otherwise, I probably would have had more questions for that. I didn't know your involvement in that storyline, but that, like I said, I came in towards the end, and everyone was the same to me. I only knew you as the Brian Kendrick, and, of course, your most recent stuff as Bad Company.
Right.
But I felt it was important to have you on. Wanted to get you out there and show people, what your thought process was behind one of the more, well-known characters of EWA history with the Brian Kendrick, and what you were doing currently with Bad Company. So, anything you'd like to say to the EWA universe as they're finishing up this podcast?
It's everything's going pretty well in the Fed. I mean, everyone's putting out pretty good stuff, other than the occasional no-shows. I mean, I think we had one this week, but as far as the shows coming together and the storylines going, like a lot of the new guys getting involved in storylines right away and building things up is great, because a lot of times we get guys who sign up and flake out. They don't get involved in anything. They don't really even try to. They maybe get booked in a match, no show, or do a couple matches and then disappear. But we've got a pretty good crop of new guys who just popped up. The Avi and the guy playing Bullet Club, Awesome One, I think is his name on here now.
Right.
And Maestro just started as Tyson Kidd, right?
Yeah.
And so and then I just came back as Bad Company, and we've got the tag division heating up. The women's division's kind of fallen back down. It hasn't really picked back up in a while, unfortunately, but
it's cyclical.
It seems to have its ups and downs, and just throughout the time I've been here, I'm pretty sure for a while it wasn't even a title. The tag titles, when I started here, had just come back, and there was like a battle royal for it, and there was a stable that was like Buff Bagwell and Jeff Jarrett and some others, and the Bagwell and Jarrett won the tag titles. And that was one of the first few shows I read after joining here. And but it's good to see the tag team division doing well, and looking forward to you and Brett taking on Steve. Hopefully you win against him, because he's a cunt.
Right.
And
I'll agree with that.
Everybody will, I'm sure. It's true. You can't not agree with the fact that he's a cunt.
29 podcasts in, and Steve has yet to come on, and I plan on going another 29 without talking to that stupid ass. So,
even though you invited him this time,
I didn't really. I was gonna. I was gonna no show on him.
Brag. Oh, okay. You're just gonna call him and be like, "Oh shit, me and Cameron are done."
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't know what your time zone, how it worked.
Exactly. What time is it over there? I don't know.
He's on Price's podcast, though, hasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's because they can understand each other, though.
Right. There's no standards in that podcast. All right. Well,
yeah.
Thanks for coming on, Cameron. It's been an absolute pleasure. Always enjoy listening to new people talk about their characters and stories. Look forward to having you back on. Best of luck to you in the future with Bad Company. And, like I said in the feedback, if you had gotten up a second one, Brett and I were very nervous about our chances of coming out winning. So, I know life gets in the way and sometimes people get busy, but, you had a legitimate shot heading into the match with a second role play. So,
right.
You definitely have a chance to do some major things in the tag division. I'm looking forward to seeing
appreciate it.
More work from you there. Everybody else who's listening, thanks for listening. Next week, or in a couple weeks, we got Podcast 30 coming up. It's going to be a big one with a special guest and lots of other stuff going on, so look for more information on the forums regarding that coming up. And, Cameron, thanks for coming on again, man.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll talk to everybody soon.